Okay, so let's start. So today we are going to discuss in previous class we have discussed about the features of unit design. So today we will discuss about the content, or we can say that organizing the content. So let's start with with an example that when a teacher plans a lecture, he or she has to make choices about how to approach the topic and how materials to include. Suppose we can take the example. If a teacher of law in England will use examples taken from English law, while a teacher in India will emphasize Indian law. Simple. Like that, a botany teacher of North India or no, yes, a botany teacher of North India may base lecture on plants commonly found in the North region. Simultaneously, we can say a teacher from Southern India will may choose different examples from their part. So why this is so? When a teacher tries to make material relevant to the learner, he will or she will think about the local, or we can say the culture where the students are going to reside. In this case, the distance educator also takes relevance as the main criteria, we can say, for selecting subject matter, and this requires imagine, because as a distance teacher we need to predict what the learners all over the country will find relevant. And if the subject matter chosen doesn't seem relevant to the learners, then they will not only find the material boring, but also they will also fail to learn effectively, as there will be little stimulus to thought. So then we can say that the choice of subject matter also be affected by the aims of the course. Take an example that if a primary veterinary surgeon or others who work with animals will give the example of a name. We can say that a zoology teacher may be giving example of the veterinary surgeons or who work with the animals. Like this, the syllabus might be identical, we can say. So in this case, subject matter must be related to effective learning. Then we can say that the distance learner, here is the case is that the distance learner are passive to sit and to read and learn by the actually the distance learners are sit, read and learn by heart without any thinking. So as the course developer, we need to fight against this tendency always, and one way of doing this is to select subject matter which stimulates thinking or which sets a problem to be solved. So here we can give the example that a science course concerned with energy, for example, we can say might be constructed around the theme of world energy crisis, with individual units related to scientific knowledge, to specific energy uses and need in the home and village. Okay. Then let's start with what are the criteria for ordering material. So when as a teacher teaching methods, we can say that it is a continuous process, and we can say there are two things, that is a teacher gives out knowledge which the students learn without any questioning, and the second one is entirely student center, which we can say the example of discovery learning. So the kind of teaching method used affects the order of material. So towards the more prescriptive end of the continuum, and the teacher starts by we can say here the teacher maybe start with a order, and the teacher needs to continue it. For in a discovery learning, however, the teacher may present the students with simple problem or ask a simple question, and then guide the students from the simple beginning until they have built up through understanding of the principles. Then in learner centered methods, we can say it is effective but time consuming, both for the teachers and the students. Teacher centered methods, however, we can say inadvisable in distance education. Then the learner must be encouraged to think and learn actively rather than mere absorb facts. Then the passive learner is like to fail or drop out. in a discovery learning approach. So if we wish our distance education materials to be learner centered, then the order in which present the subject matter has some importance. So for this, we need a bottom up rather than a top down approach. Let us know what are the some common approach. First one is topic by topic or parallel theme approach. So in this approach, what happened, the topics are treated independently of one another and can thus be studied in any order. Then we can say the chronological sequence or historical approach. So here what happens, here the events happening over a period of time and presented in the same order in which they happen. Then the third one is place to place or urgent places approach. So in this approach, we can say that this is a spatial equivalent of the chronological approach, where the presentation we can say is from one place to an urgent one. So, for example, we can say that in describing the structure of the human body, we start from the head, then move on to the neck and proceed towards the down the toes. Then another approach is concentric circle approach. So this is a variant of the place to place approach. Here one idea or one concept is included in the next one, and that is included in the following one, and so on. And then comes here causal or cause effect chain. So here in this approach, what happens, and the content is presented in a cause and effect order. The student walks through the chain of causes and effects for some event or phenomenon until he or she reaches and can explain the final effect. So this approach is appropriate when your objective is that the students be able to work out and explain such relationship. Then come to the structural logic or the discipline's own logical approach. So in this approach, the logical structure of the discipline dictates the organization of the content. In a discipline, one topic sometimes cannot be learned without prior understanding of some other topic. For example, we can say in basic arithmetic, multiplication cannot be learned before addition. Okay, let's continue with the that is the listening skill. So listening skill comes first, then the next skills, that is speaking skill, will come later. Then come to the problem centered approach. So in this approach, content is organized in the form of concrete problems which are presented to the learner for exploration and solution. For example, we can say in a course of doctors, one of the topic might be focus on the problem of how best to deal with the waterborne disease in the children in a nomadic population. Then come to the next approach, that is spiral approach. So in this approach, what happened, the same topic is repeated over and over again as the course develops each time at a more complex level. Then come to the backward chaining approach. So here this approach is applicable where objectives require the learning of sequences. In this approach, the last step in the sequence is learned first, then followed by the second last step, and thus working backwards to the third step. For example, we would teach interpretation of research data before presentation of data and before collection of data, and so on. So in our presentation of topics, we Use the following criteria for ordering material. For example, moving from specific to general, moving from known to unknown, and simple to complex. So other procedures for organizing the material can be specific to general also, easy to difficult, basic to advanced, simple to complex, and familiar to unfamiliar. Then come to the so as a teacher in a top-down background, I need to follow all this approach for my distance learners. Then come to the modes of presenting the content. So there is some debate about the circumstances in which it remains best to start with definition and generalizations. So the best course for educators seems to remain open to alternative possibilities. Those used to teaching in higher education or to reading or writing academic articles tend to veer automatically towards more traditional teaching approaches as this remain to the norm. So when they enter distance education, they need to accept possible and effective alternatives. So material should be arranged in a logical order, taking the students step by step through a topic. These steps must be explicit and clear in distance education. A round-bound approach to a subject can be stimulating and effective in face-to-face situations with a skilled lecturer, but usually fails at a distance. So it is important to include numerous examples in this unit. Explanation without examples are usually not enough. Very often a section of unit will begin with an example which sets the learner thinking before he proceeds to the explanation of the topic. Then we can say that in fact consider a number of alternatives to explanation which may not only stimulate or maintain interest but maybe in some cases also be a superior from presentation. For example, we can say learning could be stimulated rather than reinforced by an activity in some cases. We might teach about nutrition by asking our learner to conduct a small survey of nutritional habits in their community. Or we might introduce a physics topic with an experiment done at home. Such activities set learners on the path to understanding, and other activities may also help them to assess how much they already know. For example, we can say in political science, an activity could stimulate learners to gather and assess certain political ideas they already have. So, that they are in a better position to follow. So it is often advisable to consider alternative pros. A process may be described better in a flow diagram, data may be better presented in a chart or drawing, or a photograph may be illustrate a point. Graphical forms of representation are often usual or even essential. So there are also cases where texts are not well able to cope up with educational demands. For a practical demonstration, case studies or debates, or audio and visual media are better. So data may be presented better accurately in a chart or flow diagram, and drawing may be used in order to more easily represent a view or concept. So there may even be some aspects or topics where face-to-face work is necessary. For example, we can say skill training. Then come to the next one, that is, we can say that the world inhabited by academics is not always the same as that inhabited by students. So no matter how rare field or abstract the topic, from high energy physics through literary criticism and social theories to pure mathematics and philosophy, the material we present to students was designed by people who were themselves trying to make sense of some part of the world they then inhabited. Yet, we frequently neglect to let students in on the secret of what spawned the subsequent abstractions, leaving them mystified as to what part of the world, if any, is being elicited. So, the principal medium of academic instruction is words, spoken, written, and recorded. The chief burden of words is generality, and we can say that here I cannot communicate directly with words in as a course developer. We cannot directly communicate with words about some experience because the words themselves indicate abstraction. So classes of objects like cup, chair, or classes of experience like violence, behavior, or more abstractly feel like meaning or steps. Each listener or reader has to make the general particular by reference to their own experience, guided by definite articles, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs, which point towards interpretation. For example, the phrases "the blue cup with the broken handle." Here we manages to restrict the inherent generality of cup by qualifications, and using the definite article, the implicitly asserts that no further restriction is needed. So, in addition to the inherent abstraction of language, academic course material involves further abstraction, which may have been arrived at by a long process of questioning and modifying it. Here, the richness of meaning conveyed to a practitioner by jargon, for example, we can say social, morose, electric current, oxymoron, like this, is built up largely by trying to express what is seen, and by both perception and expression altering in the face of examples and counter examples. It is in this sense that every student must research for themselves, guided by the articulations of others. Too often, we present only a refined, articulate generalization with one or two examples towards substance, forgetting that an example is only clearly an example of something. We can say that when it has been integrated with the generality which it exemplifies. So, each discipline has peculiar and ritualistic ways in which specializing and generalizing take place. Indeed, in many ways, the characteristic quality of discipline resides not only in the actual content but in the sort of stressing and ignoring which leads to generality. So next come to the assessment and feedback. So as the course develops, we can say that assessment in education is checking how well a student has learned, while feedback is information on the quality of the work. So, as distance education use the same form of assessment as formal education, but differs in the ways in which they are used. We can say in formal education, teacher assessment is central. This includes the teacher evaluating the student's work informally in class or more formally in making essays, or we can say that marking essays or homework. So the student receives feedback immediately in a face-to-face situation or as soon as possible, depending on whether we can say face-to-face content is immediate or takes place after marking. But in distance education, what happens? Teacher assessment is no longer preeminent. It cannot be since while the teacher may have regular contact with the learner by correspondence or even face to face in study centers, there is no immediate feedback and reinforcement. The learner must therefore learn to assess herself or himself, or rather we can say that distance teaching materials provide questions and answers which enables the learner to evaluate their progress frequently and provide immediate feedback. So as the distance learner's assessment is typically separated into formative and summative components. Formative components take the form of self-assessment questions or activities, and they are not graded. So self-assessment questions are just one of the elements in the distance education assessment system. There are other forms of assessment too, and each of them has specific functions. In any one institution or even in any one course of the system of assessment, it is arranged in such a way as to suit the resource available, so the needs of the learners and the subject being taught. So next come to the one by one we will discuss about the assessment in detail. So in forms, there is forms of assessment. So in forms of assessment, we have self-assessment, teacher assessment, computer marked assessment, peer assessment, and terminal assessment. So first come to the self-assessment. So self-assessment questions have three main functions. That is, they help the student to check that a point has been understood. They reinforce memory or understanding, and they may also stimulate the student to go forward in his or her thinking. So questions with either of the first two of functions must have answers provided, otherwise they will not provided feedback. Even if answers seem too obvious to writer, they must be given because they may not quite so obvious to the learners. Teachers often feel unhappy about providing answers. Even they fear that learners will cheat by looking at answers before they try the questions. So this fear is based on a misunderstanding of the function of self-assessment questions, which are essentially a means of reinforcement and checking, and by implication are not intended to be evaluated. So if a learner cheats, it matters little. Simply reading the answer and relating it to the question itself will be some assistance to the learner, although admittedly this is not as beneficial as doing the exercise. The self-assessment questions are mostly of the objective type, that is question with only one correct answer. We shall look at types of objective question more closely later in the unit. Next come to the, that is questions with functions of stimulating the learners. However, here the objectives are not objective in nature. So such questions often ask learner to draw one personal experience or past study and may not require a written answer from the learner. The writer too is unable to provide answer, but instead a suitable comment should be follow the question to give the learner some idea of how to evaluate his or her answer. So the summative components of assessment, that is called teacher or tutor assessment. So here that in teacher or tutor assessment, the summative components of assessment may be tutor marked assessment, that is called as TMA. So workplace or institutional assessment or examination, and that's assessed and graded. So here the most important form of assessment by the teacher in distance education is the assignment. So the assignment consists of one or more questions which the learner completes and sent to the tutor or teaching for marking. So here the questions should be designed to follow the tutor to check how well the learner has learned and understood the material. Such questions will need short and or lengthy answers. They may even comprise objective type questions. Here to such questions, however, answers are not given in the unit as the intention is to evaluate the learners. To evaluate how well a learner can apply what he or she has learned, there may be, for example, we can say essay questions that encourage the synthesis and analysis of material. A single essay could in fact test both understanding and application of content, with marks of being allocated for each aspect to provide the teacher with an opportunity to assess the strength or weakness of each learner and to return written comments with the assignment. Such comments may be include advice on remedial work for a learner who has not done well, or advice on additional work for a bright learner who could benefit from it. Another function of the assignment, although this is not from assessment, is to provide an opportunity for personal contact so that the sense of isolation of both learners and tutor is reduced. Here, teacher assessment may serve simply to provide feedback to learners, or it may also count towards a qualification. Such assessment is called continuous assessment. Correspondence to tutors need to be provided with a marking guide for each assignment, especially when the continuous assessment occurs. So as a guide helps to ensure that assignments are all marked to the same standard, even though there may be many tutors. Then assignments should be mailed to learners with the relevant units. This helps the learners to organize and direct their individual studies. The assignments are, we can say, are often printed separately, particularly when new assignments have to be issued every time a new intake of learners studies is course. Sometimes the same assignment may be used over and over again, but it is always advisable to include new assignment questions to prevent plagiarism, even in we can say that in adverbal. So So teacher assessment also occurs at study centers. The teacher has little time for individual contact with the learners, but can try to ensure that each individual is coping with the course satisfactorily. The teacher can assess practical work and can also check whether face-to-face performance is equal to performance on paper or without some additional help is needed. Then come to the computer marked assessment. So we can say that it supplements or complements the teacher marked assessment. It is the only form of assessment which is seldom found in conventional education, or we can say that in distance education its functions are rather restricted. It is usually used only for testing knowledge and understanding. However, some distance education institutions have experimented with marking as a full alternative to tutor marking or teacher assessment with surpassing success. So, in the pioneering system developed some years ago by Hormod, it is the name of the institution of Sweden. A computer was programmed not only to mark assignment but also to send a personalized letter of comments to each student. Using this method, scripts were returned to the learners far more quickly than with conventional marking, and the learners were very happy with the quality of comments and responses provided in their letters. So the extract that follows describes the Hormones experiment with marking assignment by computer. As you work through the extract, keep the following question in mind. Why do you think the learner appreciates the CADE? Okay, so the CAD, that is computer assisted distance education system. So the CAD system requires that the assignment for submission are the multiple choice type. The student marks his answers on specific answer boxes. They are registered by an optical reader which produces a tape. This tape is put into a register by an optical reader which produces a tape. We can say this tape is put in a computer also, which processes the information given, collects appropriate comments from one of its secondary memories, and as an end product, prints out a letter commenting on the student's answer. So this letter corresponds to the correspondence tutor's manual corrections and comments in traditional two-way communication. So a CAD comment letter consists of five main parts. One is identification, which include tutor, student, course, mission, or number. And second one is introduction, third one is instructional comments, fourth one is evaluation, and last one is concluding stage. So the introductory texts are common to all three courses. However, there are 9 different texts for the computer to choose from, and this fact allows to considerably variation. The introduction may be extended by a text referring to printed model answers which are manually enclosed. This text is also available in different versions. Therefore, a student never receives the same introductory text on two successive occasions. So the instructional comments are two kinds. One is comments on single answers and another is special comments. So comments on single answers provide the number of questions, the letter signifying the correct answer plus the alternative chosen by the student plus the comment from explanation, which include a short discussion or suggestion for review. So the explanation can be varied depending on which alternative the students have chosen. As a matter of routine, all incorrect answers to single questions are commented on this way. However, the tutor designing comments for this system may also comment on certain correct answers. So the special comments can mostly be used flexibly. For instance, it is possible to provide a comment referring to a group of answers or to the whole study unit and refer to a student answer to one or more question on an earlier occasion of submission. So the comment designer may work out a maximum of 5 special comments for each study unit. The evaluation part states the student's number of correctly answered questions and the total marks. In addition, it provides a concluding overall comment like the introductory text, the concluding comments, and generally common to all CAD courses. The computer can also choose between 29 different concluding comments. Its choice depends on the student's achievement on the particular submission of occasion as well as on his results of the on the previous occasion. In addition, each variant is available in three verbally different verses. The concluding comments have, as far as possible, been worded in a friendly, encouraging way. Something similar might be said with regard to the CAD comment letter as a whole. So moreover, the comment designer often address themselves directly to the students, which may lend comparatively personal touch to the letter, although largely it gives to strictly to the facts. So the students write question under comments, and then here, if any of the back of the answer will be blank. So here the tutor in charge provides a reply as a rule by adding a manual postscript to the computer printed common letter. Generally, CAD comments are considerably more extensive than manual comments given by correspondent tutors in traditional two-way communication. According to a calculation, an average CAD letter comprised about 300 words. In essential respect, the experimental outcome favors the computer-assisted system at the same time as none of the results tell against it. Particularly remarkable are the students' attitude to the scrutiny of their submitted solution. In both the courses, the students are mostly satisfied with the computer-assisted tuition than with the tutor manual correction. Then the original aim of the CADE project was of an exclusively practical nature, to search for new ways to render correspondence education more effective and to improve its instructional quality. So the outcome of the two field experiments have also clear practical implications. Correspondence education with computer assisted two-way communication offline arranged as in these experiments appear to yield education effects which are in several aspects more favorable than those traditional correspondence education. Although the strength of the relationship found is not throughout of a considerably magnitude, an implementation of computer assisted tuition certainly appears justifiable from an educational point of view. Then come to the peer assessment. So in peer informal assessment or performance by fellow learners is common in conventional education, but rarely occurs in distance education. So when it does occur in study centers, its main value is to boost confidence. Distance learners are always greatly encouraged to discover that their fellow learners respect their ideas. Then come to the terminal assessment. So examination or terminal assessment plays the same role in distance education as in conventional education system. Usually more than 50% of marks are awarded on the basis of terminal examination, although a few distance teaching institutions have experimented with the accreditation on the basis of assignment and dissertations only. In open universities provide their own examinations. Most of them, however, prepare their students for public examinations or for the examination of a parent body. We can such as Directorate Correspondence Courses of India, which prepares its students for the usual university examination. In considering these forms of assessment, we have seen that there is a great emphasis in distance education and self-assessment. At the same time, each institution uses the means available to develop a system which provides sufficient opportunity for the teacher to check the learner's work and provide advice where necessary. An opportunity for the learners to have some personal contact with the teacher and fellow students. So we can say here that the standardization are maintained through course letter notes for assignment markers and study centers respectively, which gives guidance on marking and suggest activities as appropriate. Institutions often also brief all their teachers on new courses at the time of the launching of these courses. And then come to the we will discuss some more thing about self-assessment. So self-assessment questions should occur frequently in any distance teaching material. They are normally presented as a feature separate from the main text. One reason for this is that the answers to the questions are also given in the unit, and both the questions and answers therefore need to be numbered to ensure identification. This leads to the necessity of separating them from the continuous text. There are other advantages we can discuss here, that how constantly we can say that how can we construct questions that are neither too demanding nor too easy, that provide reinforcement without interrupting the flow. So in many distance teaching materials, the self-assessment question are the least satisfactory feature despite their importance. In order to see why this is so, we will look more closely at different forms of self-assessment questions and consider the problems that arise in constructive intelligence forms of objective questions. So objective questions are those that have only one correct answer or sometimes a limited choice of correct answers. A question that requires the learner to select the correct answer from a list is an objective question. They are valuable for their ability to provide reinforcement and feedback as the answers are precise and unambiguous. So forms of objective question, we can say there are two types. One is selection type, another one is completion type. So in selection type, it includes the multiple choice, true false question and matching question. And then in completion type, it includes sentences with words missing or tables with figure missing and like. The learner must supply the missing item. Questions with one word or every simple answer fall into this category. And then come to the advantages and disadvantages of objective questions. So we can here are some question. One question, that is, are the questions too easy? This is the first question most people ask. Usually also commenting that learners should not be spoon-fed at first sight, and this may seem a fair criticism, but we must recall that a major function of self-assessment questions is to reinforce learning. Questions needs to be challenging to be effective, but all the sense should be sufficiently demanding according to the level of the learners. At this point, let us remind ourselves that objective questions are regularly used in examination at all levels. It is possible to construct questions of an objective type that test knowledge and understanding from the primary level to the postgraduate. The same form of question can be adopted to different levels. Herein, however, lies one of the disadvantages of such questions, that it is time consuming and demanding job to construct them. And in order to cover the materials thoroughly, many questions are required. Examining authorities sometimes have whole division whose job is to construct a battery of questions for use in examination. So those involved in course development for distance education have first to learn how to formulate objective questions and must then have to patience to think enough them. So those questions that are often intended to be objective are often poorly constructed as insufficient time is devoted to formulate them. So a further disadvantage is that objective question, if adequately provided, consume a great deal of paper. So bulky books may stress the budget and prove off-putting to the learners. So on the other hand, we can say the objective questions can be used for many purposes and all levels and have overriding advantage. So the learners are provided with instant accurate feedback on their program, and this makes such questions an important component of the distance courses. And then short answer questions. So short answer questions require the learner to write a paragraph, make a list or complete some similar activity relating to the material just covered. So here, on the other hand, we can say that short answer questions are relatively easy to construct, and particularly for learners at higher level, and they encourage greater independence and self-reliance. The presentation of answers. Answer to self-assessment questions not only provide feedback, they can also be part of the teaching. Alongside the answer itself, there may be information which help these learners who have made mistakes to see why, or there may be comments which make the learner consider a new side of the question. So thus the answer are not just an appendix to the unit but part of the fabric. So the course writers should acquire the habit of constructing answers immediately after they have written the question, then develop the question. These are the questions to make the learner think and do not normally have set of answer. The learner may be asked to consider a point in a section, just read or think about a topic which will shortly be explained. In particular, this kind of question is used to help the learner related to their reading to their personal experiences. So development questions are an important substitute for live dialogue. Then come to the learners and self-assessment questions. Here are the questions that why to provide self-assessment questions? Do learners complete these questions? So these are the questions many people write. Of course, not every learner bothers to answer all the questions, but many do and would probably do less well without the practices. So it is interesting to note here that the learner approach units in many different ways. Some start by looking at the exercises and then write the text. Some skip the backward and forward through the materials. Some work straight through from beginning to the end. So if a learner prefer an unconventional approach and is successful, does it matter if or she does not complete the exercise? So these are those the need of the exercise will do them. So it is, however, undesirable for the learners to read passively. A well-designed unit should not allow this to take place. Not only it contains numerous exercises within the body of the text, but also lead the learners to think to apply what is learned practically or to discover new ideas for themselves. So this much about the content. We can say that we are content design. Sorry, organizing the content. Next, we will discuss about the unit 4, that is organizing the presentation. So start with the organization of the presentation. Um, we start from the introduction, that is then presentation and motivation, then legibility. In legibility, we will include the type, paper size, paper color and quality, on legible graphics, illustration, diagrams and charts, attractiveness, accessibility. So when I'm talking about learning by reading a text is so as a distance learner, it is not easy to learn by reading a text, and the reader must not put considerable effort into the task. We can say there are 3 categories of factors which contribute to effectiveness: the presentation of the context, the label and clarity of language, and the format of the text. So in other words, we can say that the meaning must be clear, the language must be simple, and the text itself well presented. It is difficult to estimate how much importance to attribute to each of these factors, but it appears that the third factor, it is more important than others. Okay. Next, let's start with the presentation and motivation. So here is some questions like, to what extent does the appearance of a text matter? It may give us pleasure to purchase an attractive book, but it is of any educational importance whether or not a book is good to look at. We can answer these questions both in affirmative and negative. If a student is very highly motivated, she or he will learn even from poorly produced material. There have been cases where distance learners have accepted handwritten duplicated notes. Many correspondence courses consist of badly typed, densely packed pages with thin draft paper, and a proportion of learners will always study successfully even with such materials. So on the other hand, distance learners can easily lose confidence. In distance education, the learner must persist with his or her studies over a period of years. Dull, unattractive materials wear away the will to persist and restore learners' confidence. Despite being dull, poorly presented materials are actually more difficult to learn from. Research on typography has led to a number of guidelines for making text legible. If these guidelines are not adhered to, text becomes more difficult to read and the content is consequently more difficult to understand. So these findings on legibility applied to any text. Research on the habits of distance learner has led to further consideration. Distance learners do not necessarily read their unit continuously from beginning to end. They may skim through them and they may return to read selected parts carefully. Some start by looking at the summary or assignment at the end, and others may approach the material in an unpredictable way. This appears to be a matter of individual difference between the learners. There is no indication that one way of studying intrinsically better than other. The designer of self-instruction materials must, however, bear in mind the probability of differences in approach between learners. However, can such differences be catered to? How the materials can be made accessible to everyone? Let's start with this answer. So first we will start with the legibility. So the main factor in legibility as the type phase. So it arrangement of the paper and the quality and type are used. So first let's discuss about the type. So letters, characters, as they are called by typography, come in many different forms or typefaces. But for the Roman alphabet, the one used for English, we need only distinguish between ordinary and display typefaces. Display typefaces are those used in advertisement, hoardings, book covers, and so on in order to make a special impact. They should never be used for the body of a text as they are often ornate or conventional in design any and difficult to read. So a great range of typefaces are available, probably far more than you are aware of. Most are quietly legible, although a few are unsuitable for educational text, such as those with tall, thin characters or characters with very fine vertical lines or some with artificially square shapes. We can see the see text in really unsuitable type, but some clearly more attractive than others. So this has been long-standing controversy about whether the serif or the sans serif typefaces are preferable. So serif are the short lines across the ends of the arms and streams of letters. So some modern styles do not have serifs and others known as the sans serif. Experiment to discover which style was easier to read yielded conflicting results, and the conclusion has been drawn that readers prefer the style they are most used to. Each typeface is available in three styles. One is Roman, that is ordinary, italic, and bold. So italic is the term used for light sloping letters. We all know about what is italic, what is bold, and what is ordinary. This is Roman style. Okay. Next, start with we can use the capital letters. Then come to the arrange the type. So we can say that it is also a good silent reader reads words in groups, 4 or 5 words at a time. Observation of the eyes of people reading have shown that the eyes do not follow the print smoothly along the line, rather they proceed in jump. With the eye resting on a focal print smoothly along with the line, rather they proceed in jumps with the eye resting on a focal point in each group of words. Most movements are forward, but sometimes the eyes jump back and repeat a bit not well understood. So the points that Follow can be explained in terms of how we read with the jumping movement of the eyes. A good arrangement of text or layout uses cues and devices to catch the eye effectively. So a first consideration is the line length. After a long line of text, the eyes have to jump back farther to the start of the next line. The longer the line, the greater the risk of wrongly identifying the next line and wasting time searching for the correct place. It appears that if the average length of line exceeds 60 characters, the risk of error is unnecessarily high. It is normal to take 60 characters as a near maximum. So what happens if the lines are very short? Then think about the newspaper columns. They are quite easy to read. In fact, you can train yourself to scan newspaper and get the gist by moving your eye column. Okay, let's then in practice we can say that in short lines, in order to make the best user space, we would put two columns on a page. If we use to short lines, the result can be a dense and forbidding page. So too many words on one page is quite off-putting. So whatever length of line, each line normally starts the same distance from the left of the page, so that straight margin could be drawn alongside the letters. So a printer describes this is left justified, text also may be justified to the right of the page, but this is optional. Next comes to the how we can do these are legitimate, that is finally we can do the horizontal or we can do the justified according uh, according to our needs. Then come to the paper size. So most distance teaching institutions, we can say now use the paper size from the international system, that is A4 paper. The size we are using right now being the most common. Then A5 is the half of the size is also used. We can say that older size as the Punska or Quattro. So these large sizes of paper are good for typing. So 60 characters from the most type letters gives a line of 6 inches long, which fills an A4 page quite nicely and leaving a good margin. The pages, however, are not so good for typesetting. A typesetter will normally use slightly smaller letters, and a line of type carried on right across the page would contain too many characters for comfort. This has led to the page design which has become associated with open university text, where a block of text fills only two-thirds of the page with words, as the case with the text which we are reading right now. So the blank space on such pages can be used in many ways for subheading, keywords, symbols, illustration, and diagrams, or simply as space for learners to make notes. So the page design itself is quite attractive, but it is, however, expensive on paper. So paper color, then come to the paper color and quality. So most printing is in blank ink on white or near white papers. Text remain easy to read if other light colored paper is used or other dark color ink is going to use. So two color printing is particularly attractive with the second color used for emphasis or two column used in diagram. So light ink and dark paper should never be used. Of course, we can say that any variation or changes from black ink or white paper may most cost more. So the quality of paper is almost an important consideration. Poor quality paper is often thin and absorbent. Sometimes good printing is also spoiled by the use of poor paper, with the print showing through from one side to if the paper is thin, then it can show this side and another side. Then legible graphics. So pictures, diagrams, charts are important features of distance education units. They can help to explain or teach ideas better and by bringing them alive. So in some subjects, they are particularly important. Moreover, we can say that individuals differ in other approaches, some being more visually oriented than others. Such people may need pictures even though others may bypass them. So let's start with illustration. We can say that it is widely accepted that the textual components in distance education material need to be both more explicit with respect to the content uh, presented and more supportive with respect to the instructional guidance that is provided to the learner. There are two widely accepted broad categories of use of illustrations with the self-learning materials. One is motivational affective purposes and next one is cognitive purposes. So first this category includes photographs, drawings, cartoons, which makes a good picture. So first, it must be relevant to the point and must be familiar and responsible. If we cannot identify what there is in a picture, it is quite useless. For example, a photograph of dry, cracked earth to illustrate the effect of drought may simply look like a collection of smudges. So the advice may above seem unnecessary. It has to be recognized, however, that not everyone sees the same picture the same way, and often a picture apparently clear to the course developer as the course developer communicates a different or incorrect message to many of the learners. To reduce this risk, two important guidelines should be followed. One is a picture should be placed near the text which refers to it, and it should always include clear explanatory references to the picture in the text. In addition, it is usually advisable to provide caption to the picture. Then, often in distance education text, we can find that the line drawings rather than the photograph. So, photographs requires a more expensive printing process than line drawings and do not reproduce well on cheap paper. Distance education sometimes express regret that they cannot use photograph more often, and in fact, there is no real loss insert here. So, on the whole, readers find line drawings are useful and attractive as photographs. Then come to the diagram and chart. So, this category includes graphical material where words and graphical features are mixed. They are particularly important in distance education for explaining processes and sequences. As with illustrations, they may should be linked with the explanation in the text and should normally be numbered. So, a common error in the use of sequence of diagrams is used too few diagrams. A demonstration on paper has to be described the sequence of events that occurs in reality, and each step must be plotted clearly. In science, for example, we can say while the conventional written description of an experiment shows one diagram of apparatus, the distance education unit should have several. There are a number of ways presenting informal graphically. These are flow chart, die chart, digraph, line graph, table, and so on. So considerably attention needs to be paid to choosing the best style for this kind of information being presented. Many distance education institutions pay too little attention to graphics. The professional services of graphic designers and illustrators are in fact important for the successful design of the text. Obviously, well-designed text always attracts the attention of the learner. Making a text appealing is thus vital in distance education. Then come to the achieving usability. So the analysis of usability has suggested that written materials are used more easily if they are designed to be compatible with the perceptual strategies, the conceptual knowledge, and the information processing resources of the future. The problem is how to achieve such design and to convince producer of written materials to consider in detail the usability of these materials. Manuals and instructional texts are particularly suitable for the discussion because they encompass a diversity of types of communication, that is explanation, instructional tables, and sometimes questions. So for our discussion, we can give the example that health manual produced for the third one. So healthcare is increasingly involving part-time workers at the village level, and such workers receive little formal training, probably even less than 100 hours, but may be given manuals to supplement the training. So the design of such manuals need to satisfy a number of potential conflicting criteria. The information must be medically sound, yet comprehensible to someone with a limited education. Moreover, the language of the text may not be the first language of the helper, but it seems essentially to give adequate consideration to the need of such user, but the limitation of both time and budget often necessitates a compromise between the ideal and barely adequate. To achieve satisfactory compromises, the producers of written material need to have some information about readers, textual representation, and the adequacy of the draft text. So, we can say the techniques for discovering what the users want from a manual range from informal conversation to formal service, where comparable manuals already exist, they may be surveyed as well. Survey techniques can also be used to establish if certain words are understood and if the worker's previous experience in healthcare has led to presuppositions which may need explicit correction in the manual or alternatively can use in constructively by the writer. So decisions about the order of section with a manual can be made in the light of information obtained about the readers and their intended use of the text. So the first consideration is that the user will want to find things in the manual. The designer must therefore provide adequate access structures such as headings, color pages, indexes, reference keys, and margin of the page. So the choices may be depend on the user's familiarity with the alternative scheme. So you can see some of the pages, and you can also see how can we write the content areas. Next comes to the attractiveness. So what comes first when I'm saying that correspondence course? For most of the people, the first thought is the dreary looking set of papers, and then there are some thought of the content. The persistence of this common image probably presented the best case for making materials attractive and also indicates what is needed. First, the exterior of the course unit should be and look bright and appealing with a cover of colored paper, preferably a glossy cover with a pictorial design. Inside the text should be well distributed effort in the pages, not too dense, with suitable illustrations and design features. In fact, if guidelines for legibility are followed, it is likely that an attractive text will be the outcome. So good results can be achieved at little cost. An ordinary typewriter can use to create clear, attractive page. Transfer lettering such as stencil text can be used to make headings and the words for covers. And bright colors can be used for cover themselves. So the technology remains simple as the result far superior to grab the lessons notes of the past. So the new technology of the word processing may be used if the occasion demands that the text be arranged on the pages. So if an institution has invested in word processing equipment, there is no excuse for substandard text. So the question here is attractiveness alternatively depends on the eye of the beholder. So perhaps the serious learner is indifferent to look on the text as long as it is readable here still accepted. So let us suppose that most of our learners feel like this all the time. Here will always be a proportion of learners who have difficulties for feel discouraged. So a boring, unattractive text would be the last straw. Then come to the accessibility. So if the texts are learner centered, then learners should be able to use them as they like. But options are only open in so far as learners can recognize alternative approach to the material. So once again, we can we can do a comparison between the traditional and correspondence lesson. So long dense pages of lecture notes with barely a break of heading. If you want to approach this material in an unusual way, you might as well cover your eyes and choose a place to start with a pin. So the text does not give you any help. So a good distance teaching unit, by contrast, is highly structured so that Sections and activities are clearly differentiated, and symbols and design features are used to indicate changes. These features create an environment which allows learners to find their way around the text and to choose their approach and emphasis for themselves. So, distance education has been criticized for being too rigid and prescriptive. As we have seen that the behavioristic approach to learning has been highly influential in the evolution of course development procedure, and emphasis on usability and accessibility counters the tendency to be too teacher-centered, and some of the organizational devices deriving from the behavioristic tradition can be used to serve the learners in making their own choices. A highly structured text could be framework for controlling learners instead with careful planning. It becomes a framework from which they can develop their ideas according to their own preferences and needs. Then come to the structural devices. We are already familiar with a number of devices used to improve the usability of the text. We can see what they are. So for us, we thought of statements of objectives, heading, summarizes, and division of unit in the section, and all these devices make the material more accessible to a different learner. Then come to the access symbol. So in distance education, a tradition has evolved of using small symbols to indicate different kinds of activities, a book for reading, for example, a pen or for writing and exercise. So these symbols help learners to organize their studies both by breaking the text into different kinds of sections and also by allowing at a glance assessment of the kinds of activities called for any one unit. Then comes to the importance of access structure. So as the body of research concerning learner study behavior has grown, we have become aware of the great variety of different ways in which individuals approach study. So distance education, which is centrally prepared teaching materials on the face of it, offers little scope for individual differences. Access structures, however, provide a framework within which learners can move freely and use their preferred learning styles. Unfortunately, little research has been done on access structures, and guidelines are based largely on common sense. If we are compare an educational textbook and novel both in a language we do not know, and we will probably be left to tell them apart just by appearance. So the novel will almost certainly consist solely of continuous prose. The text of the educational book, on the other hand, may be surrounded by additional pedagogical components such as content, index, glossary summarization, and so on. So why is the difference visible? So it is because the structure of the textbook has been typographically signaled, while the structure of the novel is signaled by linguistic means alone. So consider the reader's problem if the content list of this unit were to be laid out as continuous prose. So the words would be legible, recognizable, comprehensible, and memorable. So although the page might look attractive, it would nevertheless be completely unusable for its intended purpose. So the problem would not be legibility so much as accessibility. So a content list uses typography, layout, and signaling to display structural relation in its content, and the structure of a complete book can be made accessible in a similar way, that is, typographically signaled devices can be used to help readers overview the text and locate relevant parts efficiently. Uh, so there are three main functions of these access devices, which are it enables learners to find what they need to write in a unit, that is the means and ways to teach the content. Then it also makes the content more intimate to learners and help them grasp on what is presented in the unit. And it performs the function of a live classroom teacher, and that is build a teacher into the text. So some of the access devices we use in our unit are title of a unit, structure of the unit, objectives, division of content, illustration, glossaries, and summaries. So of the above cases devices, some of the inserted expressively to enable learners to find their way in and through the text. So these are the devices such as explanatory title, content list, headings, numeric system, visual synopsis, and icons. So other described below, we can say that advanced organizer of overview. So there are four access devices frequently used by course writers, that is advanced organizers, overviews, features, and objectives. Okay. Uh, so this much about this. Uh, how can we present the content, or we can say that organizing the uh, presentation. Uh, let's come up. So in this class, we discussed about two units. One, one is organizing the content, and another one is organize the presentation. In the next class, we will discuss about the block 3 and will complete the course. Thank you. Good night.